This is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City update for September 2nd around 9 a.m. We have some activity in the tropics this morning. I'll get to that in just a minute. But before we do, I want to take a slight inventory of what has happened so far this Atlantic hurricane season. First of all, we had no hurricanes in the basin. We've had 6 tropical storms. The next named storm on the list is Gabrielle. Will we see that out of Invest 97L? Well, we'll find out in a minute. But mainly tropical storms this year in the Atlantic Basin so far. 31 cities have been affected in the Hurricane City database out of 152 cities. And that was mainly from Tropical Storm Andrea earlier in the hurricane season that crossed over the state of Florida. And what they show here is it ends as a purely tropical system in South Carolina, but it did end up as an extratropical system moving up the coast. So many areas in the Northeast were affected by Andrea this hurricane season. And then, of course, we had recently we had Fernand move into Veracruz. They've been affected by 2 named storms this year, Barry and Fernand. And then we had Chantel moving through the eastern Caribbean Sea and affected several of the Leeward and Windward Islands. So all in all, about 31 areas have been impacted so far this hurricane season, with a long way to go yet. So everybody needs to be prepared and kind of have a game plan on what they want to do out there once a significant hurricane threatens, which I think will happen this year. All right, let me switch sources here and get to our water vapor loop. And the reason I believe that 97L is going to continue to struggle is that we have this upper level low to the north of the system, and there's been some debate on the internet about whether that creates a outflow channel and it kind of helps with the lifting of the clouds and whatnot. But from what I can see in this picture, this upper level low where my mouse pointer is moving off to the west or even west-southwest. So that's going to continue to increase the wind shear down in the eastern Caribbean Sea. Now we have another upper level low over Hispaniola that's cruising off to the west. So that should stay far enough out in front of this developing system to prevent wind shear from the south. But it's this upper level here that is north of the system that I believe is going to be an inhibiting factor for development of 97L. And of note, the GFS and the European model do not do very much with this system. I'll show you those images in just a minute. But again, very hostile development for development. I know the National Hurricane Center indicates that the conditions are favorable where the center of the circulation is right now, which is down near the island of Barbados. But if you look at the water vapor loop, it's clear that there's some wind shear going on down there, and sometimes the maps don't reflect that on the internet to show the wind shear down in that area, but I'm guessing it's probably about 20 to 25 knots down there, and that's why the system is having trouble getting its act together. All right, let's go ahead and switch back to the images again and show you what the thinking is on this system here. First of all, here is the upper level winds, and you can see that the system is right near Barbados, and we have 20, 30, 40 knots just north of the system, and that's preventing the system from getting a little bit of a larger high-pressure ridge aloft to ventilate the system. I know people like to refer to these upper level lows as outflow channels, but I think this is a little bit too hostile for anything to develop when it's this close and moving actually in this direction towards our developing system. So I think the wind shear is going to continue to be a factor here. And of course, here's that upper level low cruising off to the west over here near Hispaniola. But overall, things are just not that favorable for development of this system right now. Here is the divergence and convergence, upper level divergence rather, of our system down here in the Caribbean. And if you notice, there's negative divergence, and what you like to see is a positive divergence up here, meaning the fanning out of the clouds in the upper levels and kind of ventilating the system, but we're seeing negative down here, and that's because of these upper level winds that are screaming across here. It's just not allowing the divergence to spread out in all directions, and it's kind of negative down here. So that's another reason why we're not seeing much development with this system at all. Now here is the GFS going out to Sunday, this is Saturday, September 7th. And if you notice on the GFS, again, this is only the GFS, but it's showing these are the upper level steering winds, and you can see at this point our system would be somewhere in the Bahamas over here. And the trough coming off the U.S. would indicate that the system should begin to make that turn to the north in response to this trough up here. That's the forecast from the GFS with whatever does develop. And naturally, a stronger system would tend to be pulled a little bit more north, whereas a weaker system might try to sneak underneath and get into the potentially into the Gulf of Mexico, but I don't really see that happening, although it's possible with this system remaining weak that could happen. But if it does attain tropical storm status and head towards Hispaniola, it's probably more than likely going to get pulled north by this trough if the GFS pans out here in about 5 days from now. Now here's the euro, and this is going all the way out to Wednesday the 11th next week. And what's interesting about this is the fact that we have our system, if this is what it is over here, right off the coast of North Carolina, and the people in the Northeast might say, uh-oh, here we go again. But here's a big old a low-pressure system moving off the Northeast, and that should cause somewhat of a turning here to take place. I would imagine if you went out any further than this, probably to the 15th or 20th, this would be turning off the coast. And in fact, several models indicate that there's a possibility this could end up being a Newfoundland system up in here somewhere. So we'll have to see if that all takes place. But so far, the euro and the GFS, two things, they don't show very much development with this system. Number two, they tend to want to take it north or turn this system if it develops at all. Here's the ensembles of all of the models currently being tracked on the system. And you can see a general consensus here is west-northwest over Hispaniola into the Bahamas. And, you know, again, these things can shift. This is why I don't do a lot of update videos on Invest, because from day to day things can shift wildly in one direction or the other. So this is just telling you what it is right now with the ensemble models. They could shift south or north depending on the strength of the system over the next 24 to 36 hours. And here's the best performing model so far. This is the Aviation Ensemble model number 4, and it's only off by about 28 miles so far on its track. I know it's hard to see. Let's highlight it for you. It has it going generally west-northwest, just north of Hispaniola, into the Bahamas, and heading towards Andros Island in the western Bahamas. But again, that's the Aviation Ensemble model. It's the best performer so far, but this is a short-lived system, and we don't really have much model data on it at this point. All right, let's switch images back over here and show you the best, what the models are thinking as far as intensity down the road on this system. Now here are the mainstream global and tropical models on this system, early cycle models. And the best performer so far is the Schiffer model, which has this only off by about 4.6 miles so far in its journey, and that only keeps this as a minimal tropical storm through 72 hours. And then, of course, it would be tangling with Hispaniola at that time and weakening even further. So I would assume if you followed this model, it probably keeps it at tropical storm status. However, the second best performing model is up here, and that's the LGEM, and that has it up to Category 3 status going into Hispaniola, and then when it comes out the other end, it maintains Category 3, which is, to me, highly unlikely that that's going to happen due to the land interaction. But most of these models dip it here slightly over land and then have it moving, gaining strength again once it passes Hispaniola. So you can't discount the models, but right now, again, that Euro and GFS, until they start jumping on board with development of the system, I'm not buying really any of these tropical models. And here is the H-Wharf, which has been ramping up everything this year, has it up to 110, Category 3 hurricane, 125 mile an hour winds going into Hispaniola. Again, I just don't buy that. And then has it weakening and then re-strengthening again once it gets in the Bahamas. And then you have the GFDL model, which has it up around 70 miles an hour at landfall in Hispaniola, and then struggles with the land and then makes it eventually into the Bahamas again. But I'm just not really buying these models with the intensity right now, considering the upper level lows and the land masses that this thing is going to be traversing. Anyway, here's our graphic of where the system has been and where it is right now. And it's right just northwest of Barbados. I will not be featuring any cities at Hurricane City until we have a well-defined center of circulation, or at least a tropical depression to track, because this system is so broad in nature and so disorganized at this point that it's really hard to track anything at Hurricane City. But anyway, you can visit Hurricane City for all the latest, best performing models. And all this information can be found at Hurricane City on the front page and in the drop-down menus. That's it for now. We'll keep track of Invest 97L over the next several days. If there's any major developments, I'll be back with another update. That's it for now. Thank you again for visiting Hurricane City.